Hello, welcome to another lesson with Mr. Fieck. Today we're going to talk about adding, subtracting fractions with unlike denominators, or how to find a common denominator when you have fractions. The learning target for today is that you can compare fractions with unlike denominators and add and subtract them, compare them, because we know that we've learned earlier this year, in order to add or subtract fractions, you have to have a common denominator. So let's jump right into it. Number one says Brianna and her brother Corey love the kind of bubble gum that looks like long roll of tape. The whole roll is way too much gum to chew at once, so their grandma cut two pieces that were exactly the same length. And that's key because whenever we're talking about fractions, our wholes have to be the exact same length. So Brianna cut her gum into 3 equal pieces and chewed 2 of them. Corey cut his gum tape into 5 equal pieces and chewed 3 of them. Who chewed more? So Brianna chewed, she cut it into 3 equal pieces, so that's going to be our denominator. However many pieces we cut our whole into, that's our denominator. And we're looking at she ate 2 of the 3 pieces. Corey cut his into 5 equal pieces, so that's our denominator, and he chewed 3/5 of a strip. So then who chewed more? Well, now it's basically, we're comparing fractions, okay? One way we could compare fractions is we have 2/3 and 3/5. We can make a common denominator, and the easiest way to find a common denominator is multiply the 2 denominators together to make equivalent fractions. So if this is 5, I'm going to multiply times 5 and times 5 over here, and I would get 10/15. And then here I'm going to do times 3 and times 3, and that would be equivalent fraction to 9/15. Well, 10/15 is greater than 9/15, so who chewed more? Brianna chewed more. Okay, the other way we could do it is simply cross multiplying. And when we cross multiply, you climb the ladder. So 3 times 3 would be 9, and 5 times 2 would be 10. And simply, that's what we just did. And that's why cross multiplication works, because you're multiplying it by the other denominator. Okay, we know this because if we find a common denominator or we cross multiply, 2/3 is greater than 3/5. Okay, let's go down and look at number 2. Their cousin Malik and Caitlin came over. So to be fair, their grandma gave them each a piece too, right? That's what grandmas do. Malik chewed 3/4 of his, so 3/4, and Caitlin chewed 7/10. So again, we could make equivalent fractions that have a common denominator, and then whichever numerator is greater, that's the bigger fraction. Or we can simply just, in this case, cross multiply. 4 times 7 is 28, and 10 times 3 is 30. Well, 30 is greater than 28, so 3/4 is greater than 7/10. So who chewed more? Malik chewed more. How do we know? Because we cross multiplied, and 3/4 is greater than 7/10. So just easy way, comparing fractions by cross multiplying or by making a common denominator. We're just going to do a couple review problems over here. It says rewrite each fraction with a denominator of 24. So if I know my denominator is 24, well, how do we make equivalent fractions? We have to multiply numerator and denominator by the same number. So 3 times what is 24? Oh, 3 times 8. Well, if I multiply that by 8, I have to multiply that by 8. So 8 times 1. So what's an equivalent fraction to 1/3 that has a denominator of 24? 8/24. Let's look at another one. If I go down here, I know I need a denominator of 24. So 12 times what makes 24? 12 times 2 is 24. Well, if I do that for the denominator, I have to multiply my numerator by the same number. What's 7 times 2? That would be 14. So 7/12 is equivalent to 14/24. All right, then rewrite each pair of fractions with a common denominator. Now, if this was asking us to add or subtract, you have to have a common denominator whenever you add or subtract fractions. You cannot add or subtract fractions without having a common denominator. The easiest way to find a common denominator is just take your two denominators and multiply them by each other. So if I do 8 times 3, okay, so if I multiply 8 times 3 here, that's going to get me 24. So my common denominator is going to be 24. So if I multiply 3 times 8, I have to multiply 2 times 8 as well, which would be 16 24ths. Now here, I'm going to multiply my 8 times 3. So again, I have a denominator of 24, but then I'm multiplying my 5 times 3 as well, because you have to multiply the numerator and denominator by the same number to make equivalent fractions. Well, 3 times 5 is 15. So in this case, 2/3 is greater than 5/8 because 16 24ths is greater than 15 24ths. Let's look at this one. Now, again, I could compare 5/12 to 3/4. We don't have a common denominator, but it says I want to rewrite the fractions to make a common denominator. So if I was just comparing, I could do 12 times 3 and 4 times 5, figure out which is greater. But in this case, I could do 4 times 12 and 12 times 4 and get a common denominator of 48. But if we know our basic math facts, we know I can multiply 4 by something to make 12. 4 times 3 makes 12. And if I multiply that by 3, I multiply that by 3. So I actually don't even have to change 5/12. I can leave 5/12, and then this 3/4 equivalent fractions with a denominator of 12 would be 9/12. So actually 5/12, I don't even have to do anything. Again, just being efficient mathematicians and taking an extra second to think about it. And then 5/12 is less than 9/12. So 5/12 is less than 3/4. Now let's just see if we cross multiply. Let's see, 12 times 3 is 36. And 4 times 5 is 20, and yep, it works because 20 is less than 36, so 5/12 is less than 9/12. So again, incorporating a lot of the skills that we talked about in our first 3 lessons, bringing it all together with comparing fractions, finding a common denominator, and once you have a common denominator, how you could compare fractions. But then also, once you have a common denominator, you can add and subtract fractions just like you would regular numbers, okay? Hope this helps. Make it a great day, boys and girls.